Right, these next set of notes are all about the nature of God, and particularly starting with eternity. But before we start specifically looking at eternity, mainly the issues with the nature of God, looking once again about the philosophical problems, so how they contradict each other, and how the very concept of God can make sense, how it can be coherent. But also you see a lot of overlaps with things like language. So how can we actually adequately express our understanding of God and therefore its nature? And then also the evidence. Is there any evidence to actually support that God has this? Now, whilst evidence is a valid point, the focus of your attention should really be focused on the philosophy. So are there any logical problems with why God cannot be both, say, eternal and omnibenevolent? Now, with eternity, starting with the sort of Greek concept of Plato and Aristotle. Now, fundamentally, Plato and Aristotle believed that God was simple. Now, what this means is completely uncomplicated in its purest form, i.e. there's simply one. That there's no way that you could divide up God in either metaphysical or physical terms. He was indivisible. Now, based on this idea, then we get two strands of what we mean by eternal. The first is that it has infinite duration, so it will go on forever. Now, this is what we call a sempiternal argument. The second is that it means duration without limits. So whilst God lasts, we can't limit. If we can't limit God, that means we can't limit God at the beginning, we can't limit God at the end. And the idea here is that God has no succession. Therefore, there is no before and after, or past, present, future. And this is called the atemporal view, which is what we'll be looking at as well with both these, you should remember. And the idea is with this type of God that all of existence is occurring simultaneously, what we call the simultaneous present or the simultaneous moment. So it's an unchanging present which is conscious of all time, so everything happens at once. Now, in terms of the criticism of this view, it seems to be unscriptural. Now, when we look at the unscriptural nature of it, is the fact that the idea of salvation history, or the intervention of God, if God ultimately is atemporal, then that means that he can't change his mind. Therefore, he can't have a genuine loving relationship with you, and he can't intervene, because everything is constantly happening. The idea of intervention in salvation history was that once the chosen people behaved themselves, became faithful, that they would be rewarded and would be helped. Well, you can't do that if everything's already happening. The second issue, in terms of the loving relationship, is more to do with the fact that what would be the point of Christ's sacrifice on the cross? Again, it doesn't really make sense if God is aware of everything that's going to happen straight away. He should know at the dawn of time that he does need to send Christ, or it needs to change things. He doesn't need to wait, because he can't wait. It doesn't make sense. There's a contradiction. Now, Swinburne's other issue with the Hezekiah example is this idea of God changing his mind. So we've got an implication for omnipotence, because if God is truly going to be eternal, then there are some things that he can't do. A, have that relationship with us, but also change his mind. The Hezekiah example is where God apparently does change his mind. Hezekiah is told that he's about to die, because he's a very faithful person. God sends an angel to do and tell him, or a prophet, I can't remember which one it is, I think it's a prophet. Hezekiah whips very bitterly and says, I'm very faithful, why am I going to die? I'm not ready. And God changes his mind. He says, you know what, yeah, Hezekiah has been very faithful, let's reward him, let's give him a few more years. Well, this doesn't make sense. If God is atemporal, then he's already made his mind up. But he can't make his mind up, because there's no mind to be made up, because effectively everything is simply happening now. I can't change my mind right now and do what I'm doing. I can change what I'm going to say next. I'm going to go on to talk about omnipotence, I'm going to talk about benevolence, or I can have a bit of a break, because I'm a bit tired, probably the latter. But God can't do that, because everything's happening straight away. The only other issue to talk about is with Aquinas. Aquinas rejects the sempiternal idea, because he believes that ultimately we are limiting God's power. So, if we're going to say that God is sempiternal, then there are things that he can't do. So we are placing limits on what we mean by eternity. What's the word I could say? We are effectively saying that God has to operate within the realms of past, present, future. And although Aquinas recognised the problems with the atemporal view, he still accepted them. And the other issue that he pointed out was to do with creation. The fact that creation requires a time, and if God's completely outside of time and God has everything happening at a simultaneous moment, how can we ever have a creation? Because to have a creation, the classical Christian idea, God needs to go, we're going to start it. So they're the main problems with eternity, but they'll be touched upon as well with the Boethius video. So you might want to watch the Boethius video now.